Hello, young humans. It's your old friend Michael Chabon, and I'm here for story time. Today, we are finally going to give a try to a book I love. I've been wanting to do it since the beginning. It's Lyle, Crocodile. It's kind of long. So if we have to break it in two, we'll break it in two. All right? And you'll come back next time for part two. How about that? All right, here we go. Lyle, Crocodile by Bernard Weber. Here's the title page. And you might be able to tell from that picture that this story takes place in New York City. That's the view from Central Park. This is the house. The house on East 88th Street. Mr. and Mrs. Prim and their son Joshua live in the house on East 88th Street. So does Lyle. Listen, swish, swash, splash, whoosh. That's Lyle. Lyle, the crocodile. How about that? This family lives with a crocodile in their apartment. Lyle was very happy living with the Prim family. He was especially happy when he was being useful, like helping Joshua brush up on schoolwork. Here he is with the Prims at the dinner table. And here he is being useful. He's helping Joshua. Holding a flashcard there. It says 9 plus 6. In case you're wondering, the answer is 15. But if Lyle was happy, he was making someone else unhappy. Perfectly miserable, in fact. That someone else was Loretta, Mr. Grumps's cat. Mr. Grumps lived just 2 houses away from the Prims. Whenever his cat caught even the slightest glimpse of Lyle, she would fling herself into a nervous fit. See? There's the cat. She's arching her back. See, that's how you know a cat is upset. That's Loretta. Lyle wanted desperately to win Loretta over. He tried flashing his sweetest, most toothsome smile at her to show how really friendly he was. But this only frightened the distrustful animal even more. Because what happens when a crocodile smiles? They look kind of scary, huh? And see, now she's really arching her back, isn't she? Poor Loretta. In the end, Mr. Grumps, who was even more excitable than his cat, would burst from the house shaking an angry fist at Lyle. "Something will have to be done about that crocodile," he shouted as Lyle fled to the safety of his own house. You wondering what Mr. Grumps looks like? See, these are row houses, brown stones. Here's Mr. Grumps coming out to yell. Lyle's trying to hide. To take his mind off his troubles with Loretta and Mr. Grumps, Lyle filled his days playing with Joshua and his friends. He loved being it. See, they're playing tag. Lyle likes to be it. Or maybe it's hide and seek they're playing because I see he's covering his face. He could skip double dutch 100 times without missing. Look at that. Pretty impressive. Double dutch, as you could see, is when you jump 2 jump ropes at the same time. It came as no particular surprise that Lyle could high jump, but Loretta, who was just let out for an airing, was surprised. She was terribly surprised. Oh, see, he's such a good jumper. He's jumping over that fence, but poor Loretta, look at her. She looks terrified. Loretta was so surprised and so shaken, she fled to the nearest tree, and no amount of coaxing would bring her down. Not until Mr. Grumps arrived to rescue and comfort her would she consider coming down. "Something will have to be done about that crocodile," stormed Mr. Grumps. Now Mr. Grumps was really furious. Now he knew he would be snappy, irritable, and impossible to live with when he returned to his job in a big department store the following day. Oh, so here's the thing. See, Mr. Grumps, I mean, his cat really is scared, and it is a pain in the neck to have to go up on a ladder, and he doesn't want to be in a bad mood because he works with people in the department store, and if he's grumpy, he won't be doing a good job. Maybe there's a way they can work this out. For the next several days, Mrs. Prim thought it best to keep Lyle close at her side. Together, they fussed about the kitchen, preparing good things for the family to eat. When the weather permitted, they took lunch to the park. Lyle was always one for sharing. Isn't that funny? Here they are, cooking. And here they are in the park having a picnic. And even the pigeons aren't afraid of the crocodile. I wonder why the cat is so afraid when no one else seems to be so afraid. They even took trips downtown. There was so much to see in the big city and much to do. Mrs. Prim could spend hours just browsing around antique shops. You hear that noise in the background? Those are my children and the dog. They're in the antique store. Lyle could spend hours watching building construction, and they both loved to ice skate. See? There they are, ice skating at the Woolman rink. One day, Mrs. Prim and Lyle went shopping in a big department store. Unfortunately for everyone, it turned out to be the very same store in which Mr. Grumps held an important position. Oh no. Here they are in the big New York City department store. This is another department store. We've had so many department stores in this book, haven't we? In this story times, in our story times together. And unfortunately, they were to hear from Mr. Grumps all too soon, for it was his voice that suddenly broke in over the loudspeaker to announce a sale in the pajama department. That's one of his jobs, I guess. His voice comes over saying, "Attention, shoppers, there is a sale in the pajama department." Immediately, it was as if everyone in the store was in desperate need of pajamas. Separated from Mrs. Prim, Lyle was swept along with the crowd. As they neared the pajama department, Lyle thought he heard a familiar voice. "Lyle! Lyle!" the voice called out. Lyle recognized the voice all right. And look at that crowd of shoppers, and Lyle's caught in the middle of it, all being swept toward the pajama department. He knew the face as well. The voice and the face belonged to Hector P. Valenti, star of stage and screen. That means he's an actor on TV, in movies, and on the stage. But what was Signor Valenti up to now? Well, for the moment it seemed he was very busy selling pajamas. Yes, look at those cool pajamas, first of all. There's Signor Valenti. What's he doing working at the pajama counter in a department store? Lyle remembered unhappily his days of traveling and performing with Signor Valenti. But in spite of everything, the two were delighted to see each other once more. Oh, so I guess Lyle used to be in a show with Mr. Valenti back in the day. And he didn't enjoy it. But he's happy to see Mr. Valenti again. In another part of the store, Mrs. Prim searched frantically for Lyle. "Excuse me," she said to the lady at the information booth. "Have you seen a crocodile going past? He was wearing a red scarf." "No," answered the lady. "I have no information about a crocodile wearing a red scarf." See, there she is asking the information lady. That sign says information. And this one says, "On parle français," we speak French. Aquí, what does it say? Aquí se habla español. And si parla italiano. We speak English, we speak Italian, we speak Spanish, we speak French. "Excuse me," said Mrs. Prim to the sporting goods salesman. "Have you by any chance come across a crocodile? His name is Lyle." "Sorry, madam," answered the salesman. "I have not come across any crocodiles named Lyle today." The sporting goods department. I guess he's come across maybe some other crocodiles who weren't named Lyle. Mrs. Prim grew more and more upset. "Excuse me," she said to a man wearing a white carnation. "I've lost my crocodile and I don't know what to do." Whatever the man answered, Mrs. Prim never heard it, for his voice was lost in a chorus of other voices shouting, "More! More!" That's her asking the man. Let's see what this is about. Those voices belonged to the huge crowd of shoppers surrounding Hector P. Valenti and Lyle. Because they had an audience, and because Signor Valenti could not resist showing off, he had persuaded Lyle to join him in a free performance of their old stage act. "More! More!" the surprised but delighted shoppers called out, forgetting all about wanting or even needing pajamas. Wow, look at this crowd of people who have come to see, or have stopped to watch the show. I guess it's a song and dance show. I'd stop to watch that, wouldn't you? Mrs. Prim caught up with him just in time to hear still another voice, charged with fury, shout, "What is going on here?" This was Mr. Grumps. And when Mr. Grumps saw what was really going on, his face turned red, blue, and purple with rage. "Madam," he gasped, "we do not permit crocodiles in this store. You know that. Remove him at once. And you, sir," he said, pointing a dagger-like finger at Signor Valenti, "you, sir, are dismissed." Here, you'll see what Mr. Grumps looks like at work. Wow, he's really mad. And he's dismissed means fired. He fired Mr. Valenti. "Something will have to be done about that crocodile." Those warning words of Mr. Grumps still rang in their ears as they said goodbye to Signor Valenti outside the store. Mr. Grumps at last made good his threat to do something about that crocodile. The next day he appeared at the Prim's door with papers authorizing Lyle to be committed to the city zoo. "The zoo?" Mrs. Prim exclaimed miserably. "Whatever would Lyle be doing in the zoo?" "He'll be doing whatever it is normal crocodiles are supposed to be doing," snapped Mr. Grumps, who wasn't being at all nice about it. The Prims examined the paper. They appeared to be in order. There was little they could do, at least for the moment, to prevent Mr. Grumps from putting Lyle in the zoo. Lyle's first night was difficult indeed. See, here he is. He got a paper that says Lyle has to go to the zoo. Here's the zookeepers to come take Lyle. Here's the little son trying to protect Lyle, but it's no use. They put Lyle in this cage truck and they take him to the zoo. And look, he's sad. He's really not a zoo animal. Not wanting to seem unsociable, unfriendly, he decided to join the other crocodiles who were cozily piled together. Just when he thought he had gotten himself comfortable on top, he awakened to find himself crushed to the very bottom. Look at this pile of crocodiles. I guess that's how crocodiles sleep. And he starts out on top, but when he wakes up, he's on the bottom. Lyle's restlessness so annoyed the other crocodiles, they all just got up and stomped off in a huff. Lyle was happier during the day when visitors came. He amused everyone with his unusual tricks, and before long was the biggest attraction at the zoo. Yeah, look, everyone's happy to see him. Because he can do tricks, because he was in the theater. Joshua and Mrs. Prim visited regularly, arms laden with games, toys, and the Turkish caviar Lyle so loved. Mrs. Prim did her best to smile and appear cheerful, but just couldn't hide her concern. "Are you feeling all right, dear?" she would ask. "Are you getting enough rest? Are you making friends with the other crocodiles? Do the lions keep you awake at night? Is the floor too damp? Do the flies pester you?" Lyle shook his head, yes or no, depending on the question, but he tried putting on a brave front. Mrs. Prim knew he was very well. He was unhappy and fought back her tears. Makes her sad too. One night, a new keeper arrived at Lyle's cage. Surprise, surprise, the new keeper turned out to be none other than Hector P. Valenti, star of stage and screen. Shh, whispered Signor Valenti. I have come to rescue you. Signor Valenti unlocked the door of the cage, and an astonished Lyle was set free. Yay! You can't go home again, said Signor Valenti when they had put the zoo behind him. Signor Valenti was bursting with ideas. We'll put our old act together again, he said. We'll fly to Australia. They'll love us in Australia. Lyle groaned. The very thought of never seeing the house on East 88th Street again was grim indeed and too much for him to endure. He doesn't want to go back and be in the theater. He wants to be home, stay home. Signor Valenti read his thoughts and decided Lyle should have one last look at the house on East 88th Street. Approaching the now sleeping street, they were suddenly met with a wall of dense smoke. The smoke, they realized with horror, was coming from Mr. Grumps's house. While Signor Valenti ran to signal the alarm, Lyle broke into the house and rescued the still sleeping occupants. Well, how about that? It could be handy to have an alligator for a next-door neighbor. A gasping, frightened Mr. Grumps and his cat were led to the safety of the street. Now the Prims and the entire neighborhood were awake and witness to Lyle's heroism. Mr. Grumps couldn't thank him enough. Ladies and gentlemen, said Mr. Grumps to the crowd of onlookers, Lyle is the bravest, kindest, most wonderful crocodile in the whole wide world. I would consider it a privilege and a pleasure to have him as our neighbor once more. Hooray! Shouted the Prims. Hooray! Shouted the crowd. There, see him bravely carrying out Mr. Grumps and Loretta. And here is Mr. Grumps telling the crowd he's changed his mind about Lyle. Lyle moved back to the house on East 88th Street that very night. He's back. And look, all the neighbors are there. They're all happy. Several days later, a farewell party was given by the Prims for Signor Valenti, who was leaving to seek fortune and adventure in Australia. Remember, said Mr. Grumps, speaking to Signor Valenti, should you change your mind about leaving, a job in my store will always be yours just for the asking. We need people with your kind of talent and ability. Everyone smiled happily. This says bon voyage. It's a goodbye party for Mr. Valenti. And everyone smiled happily. Even Loretta. See? That's pretty cute. So that's the end of story time for now. Until I see you next time, remember, stay safe, have fun, be kind.